my aunt in Salt Lake City with my grandmother during the summer of 1986. It was a residential neighborhood. I had been let outside to play by myself that day. Outside of the house, there was a long street that ran down the side of the houses. On one side, there was a long fence that had ivy or some kind of climbing plants growing on it, with a yard or a garden on the other side of the fence. I remember noticing some kind of vegetable like zucchini squash or cucumbers growing within the tangles of vines. I had never seen that in one of the yards or parks I had played in where I lived, so I was fascinated by it and went over to the fence across the little street to look at them a little closer. All of a sudden, I saw a man slowly walking towards me. He started talking to me, and I remember feeling a bit scared because my mom had always told me not to talk to strangers. It also made me uncomfortable because we were all alone and he kept inching his way closer to me as he spoke. I don't remember what he was saying, but it was about the vegetables growing on the fence and he wanted to know my name. I started backing away from him and I said I had to go. I was very scared and wanted to run back to my aunt's house. I have a hard time remembering exactly what he looked like, but I do remember that he looked creepy, kinda slightly overweight with a round face and crazy looking eyes. I think he had wire-rimmed glasses on. As I started to walk away towards my aunt's house, the man grabbed me. He put his arms around me and pinned my arms by my side and lifted me from the ground. I started screaming and kicking and thrashing about. He tried to cover my mouth, but I was wriggling about so much that he couldn't. All of a sudden, for some reason, he let go of me. I remember standing there stunned for a moment, then slowly walking backwards from him and staring at him. He just stood there looking at me, and then I turned and ran as fast as I could into my aunt's house. I ran up the stairs to the room I was staying in and fell on the bed, crying hysterically and shaking. My grandmother came up and asked me what was wrong. I remember telling her that a man had grabbed me outside and looking out the window and seeing a police car and lights and police talking to the man. After that, I remember nothing. My grandmother and aunt don't talk to me about it, and I never found out what happened to the man or who he was. I'm 41 now, and this frightening experience haunts me to this very day. I wish that I had answers. Who was this man? What were his intentions for me? Was he going to molest me and let me go? Rape me? Kill me? Could I be dead now if he hadn't let me go when he did? Did he do this to other girls or children? What happened to this man? Was he arrested that day? What was his name? Is he still alive? So many questions, and I don't think that I'll ever have closure. My grandmother died last year, and my aunt is an alcoholic and claims to not remember this event. If anyone here had a similar experience in Salt Lake City in or around the 1986 timeframe, please comment and share your experience. Perhaps we can never know who he was, but talking about it and sharing our trauma can only bring a sense of relief in that we were not alone in our pain and fear. This was about 3 years ago, but my aunt recently brought it up, so I thought I'd share. This was a horrid experience, but now I look back and laugh. I was 14 and was visiting my aunt and uncle over the summer. My aunt works at the drugstore a few blocks away. One day, I had to get some feminine products as I had run out. So I decided I'd bring some lunch and eat with my aunt on her lunch break. I went straight to the feminine products and in my haste accidentally knocked some down. So I had squatted down to pick them up. Note, I also had my earbuds in listening to music. I was on the floor for maybe a minute when I was forcefully pulled up to a standing position. I turned and was met with a barbecue-stained t-shirt. Looked up and I realized the guy wearing it was very angry and still holding onto my arm. He then started angrily ranting about how I shouldn't be wearing earbuds at work and should listen when someone was speaking to me. I gruffly said, "I don't work here, go find someone else," and pulled my arm from his grip. Suddenly, he's furious. He grabs my arm and starts pulling me to the front, saying he's going to get me fired for being such a rude bitch. I was literally being dragged against my will, so I start screaming, "Help! I'm being sexually assaulted! He's trying to kidnap me!" He told me to shut up and still wouldn't let go. People finally start coming around the corner as we get to the cash register. The lady there is horrified and tells him to let go of me, and she is going to call the cops. He doesn't let go, but realizes he's gonna be in trouble. So in an effort to cover his ass, he starts saying that I'm his daughter and I was trying to steal and his wife is right here to prove it. His wife looks a little shocked, but quickly composes herself. She then marches right up to me and slaps me, saying, "I didn't raise my daughter to steal." They turn, still pushing me along to leave. The whole time I am utterly horrified and didn't really say anything. At this point, my aunt comes from the back room and is utterly shocked. She starts screaming to let go of me. They start yelling that they are just disciplining their daughter. My aunt screams back that I'm her niece and they are going to jail. The guy quickly let go of me and literally ran for the exit. The cashier lady followed them out, yelling at them. Turned out, the cops had just pulled up outside and arrested them. I stayed in the back room as I was freaking out. But my aunt talked to the cops and pressed charges. They were charged with assault, attempted kidnapping, theft, and something else that I can't remember. I know the guy got 18 months in jail and a fine, and the woman got a huge fine. Creepy rest stop travel story from one of my mother's childhood friends. Here's what she told me. It was June of 1983. I was a student at a small university in central Illinois, and I was driving to Fort Lauderdale to meet my boyfriend and his family for the week. As it was my second day driving, I was planning on driving straight through to South Florida that night. Traveling southbound on I-95, I stopped at a rest area in or not far from Brevard County, Florida. It was around 9 to 10 at night, and I had just filled up my 1973 Monte Carlo at a truck stop. Though I didn't feel comfortable using the restroom, for this truck stop felt like an unsavory type of place, and I was alone and female. I considered myself pretty street smart due to growing up in Chicago and my father always telling me to be aware of my surroundings or to never trust anyone. Anyways, I pull into this rest area and park right next to the building. There wasn't a single vehicle or soul in sight. All I could hear was the insects in the woods, the distant passing traffic on I-95, and Foreigner, Waiting for a Girl Like You playing softly on my radio. I immediately felt uneasy about my lonely presence at this park and deserted rest stop, but felt that if I could just be in and out, I could drive straight through to Fort Lauderdale. As I walk into the restroom, I'm looking in all directions in a paranoid fashion, and I notice by the highway entrance ramp a pickup truck or some type of vehicle parked off-road near some of the woods. It was very odd though. I thought it was maybe some maintenance or disabled vehicle. As I'm in the restroom, I hear a vehicle outside, but maybe thought it was just someone else using the facility, so I thought nothing of it. As I walk outside, I notice that old pickup truck parked across the parking lot from my car, appearing to have nobody in the driver's seat. All of a sudden, thousands of stories that plagued the newspapers about kidnappings or murders rushed through my mind. Immediately, I rush to my vehicle, get in, and lock the door. As I turn my vehicle on, I look over and scream. There is a man standing next to my driver's side window, knocking. He was about 30 to 35 years old, very unkempt, with long hair, baseball hat, overgrown mustache, dirty t-shirt, and torn up jeans. As I panicked, he told me to calm down, claiming that he needed a couple of dollars for gas or something along those lines. I said nothing and sped out of there, looking in the rearview mirror at this man watching me drive off into the night. About 20 minutes later on I-95, I've calmed down, telling myself no more rest stops, and turned up the radio, determined to get where I'm going. I'm driving in the inner lane and notice a vehicle approaching me, so I move over to let them pass. As I glance over, and I can make out in the dark the creeper staring at me smoking a cigarette. Apparently, he had plenty of fuel. At that point, full panic took me over and I just didn't know what to do. This was before cell phones, and I-95 Florida feels totally desolate at night. I just felt completely helpless. He would get behind me and follow closely with his lights practically blinding me, and would occasionally drive in front of me to brake check or drive under the speed limit, which was 55 at the time. I was not going to stop anywhere that seemed dark and desolate, but everywhere along that corridor just seemed dark and empty at that time. I was lucky that he never tried to run me off the road, but I was preparing myself for that as well. Finally, after quite some time of playing cat and mouse, which felt longer than my entire road trip itself, I reach an exit with signs of light and life in the Fort Pierce area. I will never forget the name of Fort Pierce, for I immediately felt like my life was saved. I rush off of the exit, approach a gas station towards a gathering of cars and truckers, pull in and lean on my horn. A wonderful older man who was a truck driver first comes to my aid as others followed. He was such a lovely man, a father and a young grandfather to be exact. Even though he was a stranger, I gave him a huge bear hug and told him what was going on. As I look into the distance, I see the creeper driving by, just staring at me, then speeding off into the night. The older man had his wife with him. They were from Wisconsin and I was from Illinois. Needless to say, we hit it off immediately. Coincidentally, this was the older man's last truck trip before retiring and had his wife come with him for company. She brought me inside the crowded restaurant and bought me some coffee while we waited for police to arrive. I was able to call my boyfriend to tell him what had happened, so he and his brother drove up to Fort Pierce so he could drive the rest of the way with me. The highway patrol searched the area for the creepy guy in the truck, but were unable to find him. I stayed at the restaurant till my boyfriend arrived and actually had a fun time talking with everyone. Everybody knew each other like a huge family, from the waitresses to the truckers, treating me like one of their own. Though it was funny when my boyfriend arrived, because they started lecturing us on how dangerous it is for a female to drive alone, especially at night. I will never forget this scary experience and will be forever grateful for that man and woman at the restaurant. I feel like they saved my life. It's funny how back in the early 80s, the truckers were saying how dangerous it was to travel alone, unlike back in their day when people would travel alone or hitchhike with little to no problems. It sounds like older people talking to youngsters today, even though times have actually gotten safer than the 80s, and they have cell phones now. When people tell me how safe it was growing up in the 70s and 80s, or times aren't safe like they were when we were growing up, I tell them of my horrifying experience and to look at statistics. We were not safer at all. We just didn't have mass media throwing violent stories in our face. Bad things still do happen. And I always try to make sure my own kids, whom are of college age, know how gangrenous the world can be at times. Stay safe out there, everyone.